Good afternoon, and welcome to the College of Continuing and Professional Studies webinar, The Power of Collaboration. It's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you for joining us. Next slide, please. My name is Shanta Bulai, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. If you have future questions about this webinar or other programs we offer, the college's contact information will be on the last slide of this presentation. I'm delighted to introduce the topic for today's webinar, the power of collaboration. In today's hybrid and always evolving workplace, effective collaboration is instrumental for individual and team success, as well as professional well-being. This webinar explores how to enhance collaboration by embracing traditional teamwork principles, unlocking the power of diverse minds, boosting individual adaptability, ensuring more seamless communication, and discussing best practices for effectively navigating collaboration in a hybrid world. This webinar provides you with actionable strategies to cultivate psychological safety and inclusion for all team members, build trust and cohesion in hybrid and remote teams, harness the strengths of neurodiverse teams to spark problem solving and innovation, and lastly, overcome common challenges in cross-functional collaboration. It's a pleasure to introduce the presenter for today's webinar, Carolien Moors. Carolien has applied psychology and business insight to the challenges faced by leaders and teams as an organizational consultant, speaker, and coach focused on candor, accountability, and change for more than 30 years. Carolien, thank you so much again for being with us here today, and I will pass it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Shanta, and everyone behind the scenes and making this webinar happen. Let's go to our title slide, collaboration. I would love for all of you to let us know and to make this interactive from the beginning, to let us know what words come to mind for you when you think of effective collaboration. So please make sure you use the code and give us your responses, because there is a wealth of experience and suggestions in this room. Oh, the first ones. You people are fast. I love it. Bidirectionality, success, respect, trust, cohesion, kindness, best partner buy-in. Understanding, compromise, diversity, transparency. Okay. Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Isn't this so cool, people? I think you just, as a team, you have just created a wonderful outline for a webinar. Compromise. Oh, yes. Listening. Oh, yes. And as you probably know, people, the words that you see largest on your screen are those that were mentioned multiple times / most. So I was very happy to see understanding and listening and trust and teamwork, respect and compromise being enlarged. Excellent. Okay. You can keep your responses going. I would love to draw your attention to Henry Ford, who once said, coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, but working together is success. So, how do we do that? Work together, partner with each other, collaborate in such a way that it actually creates success. Now, you may be an individual contributor, you may be a supervisor, you might be a program director, or any other title that you have in your organization. This webinar is for everyone, not just for people who lead teams. It's for everyone who would like to become a better collaborator, but who would also like to support their team, even if it is supporting your peers or maybe supporting your supervisor, your manager, in improving teamwork and collaboration. Now, Shanta was already so kind to speak to the learning objectives, so I will not repeat that. I do want to mention that all the images that you will see in this presentation, people, they are from a website called Pixabay, where all images are royalty free, so you don't have to worry about copyright or paying for images. So, with that, we're going to cultivating psychological safety for all team members because safety comes first. So, what is this thing called psychological safety? I am anticipating that many of you have heard the term. Sometimes people think it's exactly the same as trust. There is a difference between trust and psychological safety. Trust is in relationships between individual people, and psychological safety is a culture, an environment that with other people you create in order to make certain things happen. Now, it is a shared belief, so not just by the boss or not just by 3 of 19 members, that is held by everyone, that it is really, truly okay to take risks, as in a couple of the elements you will see soon, to admit to mistakes that you have made, to express ideas and concerns, to share unfinished ideas and thoughts, which is taking a little bit of a risk because it's not a perfect idea yet or a great idea yet. It is speaking up with questions and not just the deeper dive questions or the easy questions, but maybe also the uncomfortable questions that maybe other people in the room are not comfortable enough to ask. And it is about feeling that it's truly okay to disagree with people up the chain, sideways, down the chain, and to challenge ideas, obviously in a respectful, constructive manner. But all of those things you want to feel free to do, knowing that you don't have to fear for any kind of punishment or negative consequences, such as being shut down, being laughed at, being interrupted, being corrected, etc. And there is a person, Amy Edmondson, she wrote the book Fearless Organization. She is one of the main researchers and authors on the topic of psychological safety. And she puts it like this in her book: it's the felt permission for candor. So let's keep that in mind. So, why is psychological safety important? I think that we know all how crucially, how essential it is in order to create results. If we don't feel that we can speak up, ask the unasked questions, point to maybe not just our own mistakes but also another mistake or a misjudgment, and again in a respectful manner, then not much collaboration and success and true dialogue and true innovation and problem solving happens. So, psychological safety can lead to feeling more engaged and motivated because it's the atmosphere that has been created that makes for true dialogue and meaningful conversations. You know that your input really matters, even if the input surprises others, and you feel comfortable speaking your mind. It can also lead to, it usually leads to better decision making, and that makes sense because so much more is brought to the table and to the conversation. And that doesn't always just have to be in team meetings, obviously. This can happen in one on one meetings as well. But you can voice your opinions and concerns, which leads to a range of perspectives and a diversity of perspectives. And it also creates that culture of continuous learning and improvement because we're not afraid on this team to talk about mistakes, misjudgments, about things that went really well, but also things that could have gone and should have maybe gone differently. So it's about mining wise lessons from experiences. So, examples of what to avoid. A couple of things that harm PS, psychological safety at work, and you can read through this list. It's all the things that I can only imagine each of you in the room have at one point or another witnessed or experienced. Hopefully, not all of these together in one situation or in one role or on one team, but um, we are human beings, right? Unless there is a robot or some AI entity in the room, then I welcome you as well. But we're all human beings, so we're fallible and we at times make mistakes. And what you see here is mistakes that people make. And does that mean that if we acknowledge them, it's okay? No, but we need to acknowledge them and learn from them and move on. So let's look at what is written on the right side of this slide. Negative consequences. Okay, there we go, people. Poor communication, lower job satisfaction, stagnation in innovation, decreased collaboration because people would rather do their own thing if the collaboration isn't easy and safe, fear of making mistakes, very common one, elevated stress and anxiety because of all of the above, conflict avoidance or escalation because it wasn't dealt with timely, and last, lower engagement, lower productivity, and lower retention. So if this isn't a plug for the importance of psychological safety, I don't know what is. If you would like another authority on psychological safety, in addition to Amy Edmondson, I can recommend Timothy Clark. And he has written about 4 phases, 4 stages, and many of the behaviors that you see written here are are inspired by the works of Timothy Clark and Amy Edmondson. So, 8 leader behaviors. If you are a leader or an aspiring leader, and it doesn't matter whether it's your first role as a supervisor or you've been leading teams and are now one of the executives of the organization, these are behaviors that will not surprise you, that will support psychological safety. I think they all make sense. But the question is, are we living it? Are we doing it? So, clarifying why every person's voice matters. And that might have to be repeated at times in different wordings and through different media. Personally, demonstrating humility, and especially intellectual humility, by admitting mistakes, being truly open to ideas of others, and by welcoming smart people at the table, people with very different opinions, and truly mining their wisdom and their thoughts. And it's not about immediately agreeing with them, it's about seeing how can we as a whole team, as we are working on this problem for our stakeholders, whether they be patients or customers or other clients, whether we can make our stakeholders benefit from this diversity. So it encourages you and everyone on your team to contribute ideas in a way that fits your comfort level. But it also normalize, if you want to normalize honest mistakes and learning, as opposed to blaming, shaming, and punishing. So that means as a leader, but also as a team member, people, you want to walk the talk and role model being honest about mistakes and saying, hey, last week or 2 days ago, I learned a big lesson. This was the situation, this was the mistake, this is what I'm learning from it. And I'm sharing it with you because we're all human. We all make mistakes. We need to acknowledge them, learn from them, and move on wiser. So I hope there is a lesson for you in here as well. That is an awesome way to create psychological safety. Obviously, setting clear expectations. This is something that could be under any or quite a few headings, not just creating psychological safety, but people need to know what you expect of them, the work to be delivered, but also the kind of participation that you expect of them in meetings, and then respect their preferences, because as you will see later in the presentation, we human beings have a lot in common, but there are also some stark differences. So people have different preferences in how they want to contribute. You want, as a supervisor, manager, director, reward challenges to the status quo. So you want to thank someone who challenges either your idea, a suggestion that you may have, the status quo. You really want to thank people for that, as well as contrarian opinions. And you want to invite that actively. You want to role model the pausing after someone brings something to the table, especially if it surprises you and you may be slightly uncomfortable with it. That makes you human, that's okay. But pause, breathe, listen deeply and actively, Show that you have self awareness and make sure that you reflect in the moment. How can we best proceed after this comment? Or what would be a good comment or question for me to ask, considering what was just brought to the table? And then holding regular check ins at the start of a meeting creates psychological safety. For example, by asking, "What's on your mind? Let's do a little round." Okay, let's move to the next 6 behaviors for all, not just for supervisors, managers, leaders, that support psychological safety. One of them you've heard before. Let's stay away from the yeah, but responses. Yeah, but say yes, yes, that's a new thought. I like that. Tell me more. And then maybe after that, you say, and let me give you my perspective. You want to replace judgment and criticism, and especially blame, with curiosity. So, one thing that distinguishes human beings from all other animals is that we have the capability to think about our thinking people. And how often do we do that? So, thinking about our thinking means that we realize when we are listening or when we are judging, when we are listening or whether we are preparing our rebuttal. And our judgment mechanism is really strong. And when it comes to safety in traffic and safety in food when cooking, judging quickly is important, absolutely. But when it comes to people, their styles, their preferences, their thoughts, ideas, I ask you, or maybe I should say, I urge you to tame your judgment monster because it might not be serving you, but especially everyone else in the virtual or live room at all. Next, demonstrating confident vulnerability. By activating that humility, your learning mindset, sharing unfinished thoughts, sharing misjudgments, etc. Approaching differences and maybe even tensions as a collaborator who wants to save not just our own face, but everyone's face, rather than being an adversary and starting a tense argumentation. So, approaching differences again with curiosity, taming the judgment monster and activating the curiosity mechanism, which you also do when you ask for feedback on your own delivery. Could I have presented this more effectively? Or maybe you're noticing some nonverbal or facial changes in someone and asking, hey, how did this land with you? Not saying, hey, I can see you're upset, because people don't like to be told how they're feeling, but simply inquiring, hey, I wonder, how is this landing for you, Peter? Right? And then reminding yourself of universal needs that bind us, which is respect, acknowledgement, and many of the beautiful words that you just wrote through Mentimeter in the application. A couple of helpful phrases. No judgment here. I wonder what's on your mind. We haven't heard from everyone yet. Is there anyone else who would like to contribute? If you do, send something. I sense you may want to say more. If that's the case, may I invite you? And what points of view have we not yet considered or not thoroughly enough? These are very helpful practical phrases that you can take away and use in your team meetings. So let's see what's next. Building trust and cohesion in hybrid and remote teams. I can only imagine that most of you um, work on hybrid remote teams or in hybrid meetings very regularly. So let's dive into how that differs. There are some unique challenges for hybrid and remote teams, which you have lived for quite a few years now, so that should not be a surprise to you. Let's just remind ourselves about some of the differences, people. The absence of physical proximity to your team members and your boss can create barriers to connecting, communication, to collaboration, especially on larger teams. Even if everyone has the camera on, I am never able, when I do my consulting, sometimes remotely and virtually, but preferably and usually in person, especially the team meetings. But for those where we work virtually, I will not be able to consistently monitor how everyone is looking, how they are expressing, maybe through facial movements, their possible thoughts or emotions. That's almost impossible to keep track of, right? So that means misunderstandings are more common in the absence of those nonverbal cues. And we usually only see someone's face, maybe a little bit of the rest of their body, but there is a lot that we don't see. Now, remote settings eliminate also those organic, informal moments where we chat with someone because we ran into them in the elevator and at the coffee machine or in the parking lot or walking from one room to another. And those are the moments that we build rapport and trust. Those touch points are small trust deposits in the bank of relationships, and the more we deposit into a bank, the more we can withdraw without any harm. That's how your bank account at US Bank or Wells Fargo or Bremer Bank, that's how it works, right? And the same works for building trust in your relationships with people, whether they are your team members or other stakeholders that you might not work with on a daily basis. But in the absence of running into each other, we don't have those moments of inquiring about someone's weekend or their child that you remember was ill last week or whatever it is that we chat about. Working remotely can be isolating for people. Now, for a lot of people, including some of my clients, whether they are coaching clients, some of my leaders, or team members, they appreciate working remotely. It doesn't feel isolating to them. It helps them balance their professional and their personal life more. But quite a few people say it is eventually isolating, especially if you thrive on the social interactions. Another difference in hybrid and remote team is vocal people may dominate the meeting even more than they might unintentionally oftentimes and unaware of it oftentimes, but more so even than in live meetings where people are sitting in the same room. Others may struggle to participate as a result of that. So that means that we lose out on those diverse perspectives, on the engagement of everyone in the room, and it leads to exclusion. Now, there could also be a lack of shared identity, technology fatigue and frustration, limited visibility at work is what some people report to me. And then we see cultural and personality differences that have always been there, but they might be enlarged during virtual meetings. And then lastly, multiple time zones. I've worked on a team with people from Asia, Europe, and continental US. And that creates an issue for when are we planning our meetings. So there could be feelings of exclusion, lower productivities, and delays in decision making. So I am pretty sure you have experienced at least one of these. So everything that we talk about in building trust and psychological safety and connecting with people meaningfully and respectfully in person applies to virtual and hybrid and remote teams, right? Everything applies. But there is a couple of other things that I'd like to highlight. And maybe no rocket science, but reminders for all of you to check to what extent are we doing this successfully as a team or I as a leader. And all of this requires your intentional effort to foster those connections, effective communication, and that shared purpose. So, 7 ideas: kick off those meetings and projects with a variety of personal icebreakers. I was working with a marketing team yesterday of 7 people, leader and their 6 team members. And we started with a round of 2 words that represent either what's on your mind or what's in your heart right now, as you're sitting here, as you just walked in at the start of this team morning. And so everyone mentioned 2 or 3 words. Depending on how large the group is, depending on the amount of time that you have, you may be able to dive in with an inquiry, a question. You want to make clear whether you're going to respond to it or just let it be those 2 or 3 words and have people in the chat respond to each other and reach out. if they so desire. But you want to make clear what you're going to do with the responses. You want to encourage regular informal virtual check ins between team members. You want to let them know, hey, make sure you check in. How many people on the team have you connected with in the last 2 weeks? And not as a micromanaging judgment, but more to encourage and to keep that front of mind. You want to inquire about virtual communication and participation preferences. I already mentioned that we all have a lot in common as human beings. And as we all know, there are some stark differences, and we want to respect those differences. But if we don't know about the differences, we cannot take them into account and respect them. So, a phrase that I use, and I've turned this into an exercise for teams that I work with, the phrase is called Personal Instruction Manual, PIM for short. So, ask people about their personal instruction manual. What are your preferences? What works best for you in these virtual meetings? What do you like? What do you not like? Doesn't mean that you can cater to everyone's suggestions and preferences, of course, but at least you can be mindful of them and create workarounds. Now, usually this would be the convener of the team meeting, this would be the leader of the team, but every individual team member can inquire about preferences. It's also a way to get to know people differently. So don't think that these suggestions are just for the leader of the team. Now, building a strong team identity with regular team mission communications, but maybe if you have some values defined as a team, or a focus area, or 3 behaviors that everyone knows the team leader would like to see and that they role model themselves. Those 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 words could be, or a phrase or a quote that typifies the team culture that you're building or want to sustain. You can have that at the top of every agenda to build that team identity. Just like a shared team logo, a slogan. I was working with a team a couple of weeks ago. I guess it's a little longer. It was end of January, and they had created a playlist. When I take leadership teams on team retreats to a different state, different location for a couple of days with all kinds of meaningful, thoughtful conversations on topics that matter for them, but also practical exercises, I always make a playlist. I ask team members, individuals beforehand, give me the names of 4 of your favorite songs currently, or just songs you like to listen to. And then I mix them up into a playlist. And during breaks, and as they are working or reflecting or writing in their leadership journal, I softly play their playlist. And then lastly, schedule activities like online trivia, wellness challenges to build that camaraderie. So, additional suggestions. Unique challenges stem from remote and hybrid work. Normalize them by talking about them. Can we prevent them all from happening? No. Can we prevent challenges that are related to in person meetings from always happening? No. But we want to verbalize them, talk about them, normalize them. You can use all kinds of collaborative engaging tools. You see 4 examples here. One I already used, Manymeter, but there are so many more. Make sure that you make it more interactive, a little bit sparkly. Encourage cameras on, but I say encourage to enhance that connection. But there are individual differences, and we never know what someone's context and environment is like. So encourage it and don't judge when people do not have their camera on. If you have a team member who never does, I would suggest, if you are their supervisor, to have a just good conversation, non-judgmental but inquisitive, and asking about what's going on for that person, because it is so much more pleasant and informative and engaging to at least some of the time see someone's face. I encourage everyone to celebrate diversity. There is a lot to do about diversity in the world, especially in the US world. I will stick with what I professionally know to be true. and research backs that up, that diversity in background, experience, culture, neurological functioning, and all the other kinds of diversity, whether it's gender or orientation, they bring not just variety, but they bring the real world to your business challenges, your team challenges, your product or service challenges. It enriches team dynamics, but it enriches conversations and problem solving and innovation. And then, lastly, if you can, make sure that you plan, whether it's quarterly in person gatherings or whatever frequency, but that you do get together a couple of times a year with your people. So, let's see what's next for you. Harnessing the strengths of neurodiverse teams. Let's do it, people. What is neurodiversity? Many of you may know, but not all brains think and process in the same way. They really don't. And you might have run into that with loved ones or team members. So, everyone, whether neurotypical or neurodivergent, should be treated equally. Most people we call neurotypical. And neurotypical means that their brain functions and processes information in the way society expects us. I don't know whether that is fair to call that group neurotypical and the other groups neurodivergent. I don't know how people feel about those terms, how you feel about those terms, whether you have connotations, tastes with those terms, but it's merely about the majority of people and what society expects. Now, that fluctuates and changes over time, possibly. So, neurodiversity describes the natural way that people think, learn, and perceive the world, that they interact and process information differently than the neurotypical person, just differently. Not better, not worse, just differently. And please remember that, just differently. And with my background in 2 master's degrees in psychology, I've worked with a lot of people also as a therapist in my earlier career with neurotypical people, and they are as you and I are, and their brain functions differently. So that may show itself in how they problem solve and how they communicate and how they participate in meetings. And you maybe already read that around 15% of people in the UK and 15 to 20% of the US population are believed to be neurodivergent. But that's also because a lot of people, or that number is not higher, likely, because a lot of people go undiagnosed. A lot of people don't care about where in which big bucket they fall, but their brain functions, learns, and processes information simply differently than the majority of people. And individuals with neurodivergent traits, they may meet a diagnostic threshold for neurodivergent conditions, may, such as autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Tourette syndrome. There are more. I could list a couple more, but these could be diagnoses that they have received. And you see two references here where you can look up more information if you so desire. So let's see. What is neuro-inclusive? Because that is really what we want to practice, accomplish, be in order to benefit from diverse perspectives and in order to make those collaborations work, right? So it means to be truly neuro-inclusive means for employers to increase the awareness and knowledge, which we're doing right here, right now, of neurodiversity for all their employees so that they have a better understanding and hopefully less judgments and less frustrations and run-ins with people, and appreciate that individuality of neurodiverse conditions. Also, in order to provide adequate support. So, for a certain neurodiverse person, it may be helpful to know that they never have to speak out loud in a team meeting and they can suggest any of their thoughts and responses. They can share them in the chat or in other ways. Now, I'm not saying that all neurodivergent people don't want to talk in meetings. Don't get me wrong, not at all. but that could be the case for some. So you want to provide adequate support and free of judgment. So why does this all matter? This is about human respect, dignity, inclusion. Some of these words were in your word cloud earlier. New perspectives, they bring unique traits, in some cases, much better concentration and attention to detail than neurotypical people. There is a lot of loyalty, high job retention if we include people, if we support them adequately. They point to, and all of us point to, different ways to solving problems and to thinking about challenges or how to better the services and the products that you are creating for your stakeholders. And creativity and innovation benefit if we know how to include people of all walks of lives and preferences, and including neurodiverse people. So let's see what each of you can do, what you and I can do. Replace those labels in judging with consideration, with humility, curiosity, and learning about each other. Discuss and respect styles and differences in styles, differences in energy, differences in learning. Demonstrate genuine interest. So that means you ask meaningful questions, have meaningful inquiries, and you really listen and incorporate it into how you work with that person. And educate yourself and observe and learn. And if you notice you might not have been so inclusive or thoughtful, just own it and say, hey, I don't think that this was very thoughtful of me. Would you allow me to rephrase that? It is very simple, people, to own our own behavior and our inclusion or lack thereof, our thoughtfulness or lack thereof. So let's see what else. Some reflective questions that you can ask yourself. Which habits and patterns are unknown to me, foreign to me, maybe even a little uncomfortable for me? What may I be judging too quickly in people or in this person? How can I possibly improve this connection? What am I uncomfortable with, and how come? What does that tell me about me? What can I do to better understand this person? And what else is keeping me from collaborating fully and inclusively, strategically and thoughtfully with this person or these people? So these are some really good questions to ask ourselves. Overcoming challenges in cross-functional collaboration. So I think we have talked a lot already, but I would like to mine your wisdom again. What gets in the way of effective cross-functional collaboration, people? And you know how this works, so I am excited to read your responses soon. What gets in the way of cross-functional collaboration? So different teams, maybe engineering and marketing, right? Or any other. Yes, egos. Yes, lack of understanding, uncertainty, budget, could be. Stress, personality differences, poor communication. Yes, neurodiversity, prejudice, absolutely. Different goals. Loud contributions. Thank you for that. Stubbornness, biases. Oh, yeah. You people, you are good at this. Yeah, yeah. Power dynamics for sure. Fear. And fear is connected to many of the elements that you're putting on here. Hierarchy. Yeah, different priorities, misunderstandings, people's attitudes. Yeah, that's a lot, isn't it, people? A lot can get in the way of effective cross-functional collaboration. Thank you so much for contributing. I so appreciate this. I think collectively, you're an awesome team because you nailed it. You mentioned probably everything under the sun and beyond that can get in the way of any type of collaboration, and especially cross-functional collaboration. So in the last 3 slides that I have for you, or last 2, I believe, I'm going to share 13 strategies for effective cross-functional collaboration, these 7 and then an additional 6. But I first want to highlight the fact that everything we spoke about before has everything to do with setting yourself up for success for cross-functional collaboration. So it starts with creating psychological safety, even if it is not your regular team, but it is a cross-functional team that you may have to gather with maybe only once a month or once a quarter, or occasionally based on product or service issues that are um, are surfacing. But it is important to put those daily trust deposits in the bank of relationships. It is important to invite contrarian views. It is important to debrief and use a strategic pause when someone brings something to the table that is very contrarian or maybe a challenge to whatever someone else or you are proposing or discussing. Make sure that those egos and those priorities and those maybe fears do not seep into your heart and head, because then they will spill out in your facial expressions and in the words that you speak. So, everything that we discussed is important. Plus, the reminder of establishing those clear goals, clear roles, clear responsibilities between the different functional team members. Discuss priorities and clashing priorities because they will likely be there, and expectations of each other. I don't know how many project managers or program managers are in the room, but some of you, maybe many of you, have heard of a framework called RACI, RACI, and it stands for how you look at contributions and roles of people. So let's say there are 7 people on your cross-functional team. You could put all the different responsibilities or tasks in a sheet. And then in the spreadsheet, you also put down the R, the A, the C, and the I. The R stands for who is responsible for doing the thing. So that is acting. Who is accountable, so may not be performing the task, but is accountable for the quality of the outcome. So that is usually a manager, your boss. The C stands for who needs to be consulted. So, who do we want to mine their experience and thoughts from? They are just consulted, they are not decision makers. And who needs to be informed considering these tasks or project elements? Number 2, organize sessions to explain roles and expertise and contributions to the project and to network and build understanding rather than compiling a cross-functional team and immediately diving into problem solving and decision making. Maybe you want to organize a session that doesn't require that collaboration yet and that collective decision making or problem solving, and people just get a chance to hear about each other's roles and expectations and contributions, but also preferences in meeting guidelines. Number 3, schedule recurring sync meetings to discuss the progress, but also to resolve roadblocks and recalibrate goals and give updates. And those sync meetings might be helpful to keep separate from the recurring meeting, to really dive into roadblocks and recalibrating goals and discussing where priorities may be clashing. Number 4, encourage team members to view differences as strengths rather than as undesirable annoyances, even though they can create some tensions, of course, and actively seek input from all functions. Even if you already know that marketing or engineering or IT or HR is gonna make life difficult for you, or propose things or provide a perspective that might not fit yours. Especially then, we need to do that. Next, recognize that varying priorities and perspectives are natural in cross functional teams. Remember when we talked about normalizing things? This is another thing that you want to normalize. It is normal to be expected and okay that priorities vary, may clash at times, styles vary, and may be hard to reconcile at times. Let's just acknowledge it and find the best ways to work with that. You can assign ambassadors from each different department or team to act as liaisons and to foster collaboration. And then, of course, as always, but especially if you're working cross functionally, avoid jargon that within your department or function, everyone knows what you mean, but others may not. It may confuse and irritate others. So let's go to the last 6 strategies for cross functional collaboration. Have you defined escalation protocols? And this may sound luminous, no, not luminous, ominous. That is the word. It may sound ominous, but it's better to be prepared and for everyone to know what the protocol is and who might have final authority to prevent gridlock from occurring, right? Also, consider designating a leader to oversee the collaboration, to mediating conflicts, and to ensure accountability. So, this is different, could be a different person than the person who convenes the meetings and who leads the meetings. It could be the same person, but maybe the person who leads the meetings doesn't necessarily have all the skills and the emotional intelligence or the desire to play that role. So look at people who might actually enjoy this role. Number 3, reinforce the mindset that the team's success is greater than individual or departmental wins. I have a couple of cross functional teams who have made this into a brief sentence, a brief slogan that they put uh, above their team agenda, and not in small letters, but in big and bold letters, just to remind everyone the team's success is greater than individual or departmental wins. Number 4, ask staff about collaboration issues. Even if they don't surface in the meeting, ask them, is there anything you're running into in this cross-functional collaboration that may not have been brought to my or our attention? Do you have suggestions for improvement? And then obviously, you may not be in the position to offer workshops, or you may be, but you can request workshops on skills such as active listening, negotiation, conflict resolution, team problem solving. There are so many good offerings out there. I know that one really good source is the Center for Creative Leadership, dear listeners and learners. Center for Creative Leadership. They have so many meaningful offerings, articles, frameworks on how to provide feedback and how to have hard conversations that you can just access on their website, but also free webinars. 1 hour practical webinars. I listen to them regularly and I recommend them to my clients. So that could be a good source. It's not necessarily skill building because that really requires a workshop and you practicing things, but it at least is knowledge building around skills that are really crucial in cross functional collaboration. And then lastly, you want to share success stories. You want to be mindful of sharing small and big wins, just like we want to share mistakes, misjudgments, and mind wise lessons from them. We also want to support and motivate people. So, whether you are the leader of these types of meetings or not, you can suggest let's do a quick round, just 1 or 2 sentences around the success story of the last month. And use meetings or the internal newsletters or whatever ways of communicating you have within your organization to showcase collaborative achievements, even if it was hard to accomplish them because of cross functional differences, priorities, maybe egos, defense mechanisms. It's important to share those success stories because that is motivating for people. Now, we always leave 10 minutes for your wonderful, insightful questions that I may be able to address. So I'm curious to see whether questions have already been submitted, Shanta.
Okay, so our first question here is, do you have any strategies for how one could best redirect or push back when leadership does not value the time, respect, and holding space for those types of conversations within a regular meeting or in a Zoom space?
Okay, so redirect and push back and not giving time or space for what again, Shanta?
When leadership does not value the time and respect holding space for those types of conversations.
Oh, okay, yeah, those types of conversations. Okay. Um, Yeah, and those types probably refers to, but I may be misinterpreting this. Probably refers to soliciting diverse opinions or talking about and sharing preferences like the personal instruction manual. But in general, this is an excellent question. Redirecting, pushing back. I like the word that the questioner used, redirect, and just helping that leader become aware of the importance and the added value that you see in having certain conversations or providing space for certain exchanges, and literally asking them, would you be willing to do a little experiment and see how people's engagement and people's contributions will change and will benefit our team meetings if we make space for those types of exchanges. Would you be willing to do that? Because I am convinced, could be your comment, I'm convinced it elevates our team conversations, and it encourages and engages everyone in the room. So redirecting, I appreciate that word, and I think inviting the person to do an experiment. And why would I use the word experiment? And you can use a different word, of course, right? But it reminds or it doesn't remind, but it highlights the fact that you're going to try something different. It acknowledges and validates the fact that the person isn't making space for that because they either don't think about it or they might not value it. And you're just asking them to do it differently, intentionally for a period of time, for a couple of meetings. So that is a way to redirect and to hopefully motivate a leader who doesn't focus on these kinds of exchanges.
Great, thank you. So this
Yes.
will lead into the next question here. Do you have any suggestions on how we can cultivate these safe spaces of trust and belonging while some of our projects are requiring removal of DEIB terms and concepts from all materials and at least partially funded federally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my heart feels heavy when I hear this question. You know, we will not go into politics, people. That's for sure. There is a lot that I regret about the state of this topic. I believe that if we keep connecting, if you keep connecting with your team members in your culturally and any other way thoughtful, inclusive manner, and if you discuss with your team members, with your colleagues, with your boss, and hopefully with others in the organization, hey, let's keep doing what we know is good, what we know is meaningful, what we know is dignified, what we know is respectful. We don't, well, you do need maybe all the initiatives and the funding, but when it comes to how you connect with your team members and with people in your organization, you never got funding for that from anyone, right? And again, We're not going into politics. It is, in my world, in my opinion, extremely regretful what's happening and the way that it's happening. Yet, individual people, you and I, can continue to operate and to connect with people in a thoughtful, mindful, inclusive manner as we did before. Will there be pushback from those that were never bought into it? Likely, yes. Do I have the golden formula to prevent that from happening or getting out of hand? I wished. I really wished, but I don't. What I do know is that each of us individually can live our human values, and we can treat people with dignity, we can invite them to the table, we can listen to their responses, and we can be an ally for them when they are cut off or interrupted. Um, I hope this is at least somewhat satisfying. Great question.
Yeah, thank you. That was a tricky one. But
Hmm.
definitely, being there for our colleagues, I think that really, just standing up for what we have there makes a difference. Um, our next one is how can we encourage the broader systems we work in to collaborate and communicate to prevent, reduce, and eliminate silos of communication and collaboration?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another excellent question. So, when it comes to silos, I think many of the things that we discussed as in creating psychological safety and all the strategies that you saw pass on the slides can contribute to breaking down silos. And of course, probably the asker of this question, and many of you in this wonderful, diverse, and experience rich room know that silos can also be created by organizational structures and organizational practices and by reward systems. If the reward system of one department is in direct conflict with the reward system for another department because they are held accountable either for speed or for quality, as just one example, then all the strategies that we discussed can still help, but they may not be able to break down silos completely. So, for all of you who are interested in breaking down silos so that communication and collaboration can really happen, I would encourage you to look at all the different ways and systems and procedures that create and maintain those silos so that maybe you can even do suggestions to leadership that are more systemic suggestions to break down those silos. But again, let's all also focus, just like with the previous question, on what we as each individual human being can do. Where is your influence? What can you do? Maybe not to break down the silo completely, but to reach out to people and to connect and to get to know a different function or a different person better or differently, to get a better understanding of what their priorities are in their department or their function and what they're dealing with, what they're struggling with, what inspires them. So, in addition to looking at systemic causes, make sure that you use the influence that you have as an individual, because that's where most of your superpowers lie, with whatever is in your sphere of influence. And that influence comes with the behavior that we show ourselves, right? So, great question.
Thank you so much. So just because we're getting pretty close to time here, if not over a little bit, please remember your questions that you submitted here. And if you want to have those sent over to Carolyn,
Mhm.
send them again to ccapsinfo@umn.edu, and then we'll get those over to her. And now I will just move on next so CCAPS now offers flexible workforce development solutions designed to equip employees with the targeted knowledge and skills your organization needs. Our programs include industry-driven bachelor's and master's programs, along with 12 non-credit certificates and over 80 80 individual classes. If you or someone in your organization would like to learn more, please schedule a consultation with our business development manager, Beth Laurie. And there is a QR code there too if you want to check that out. And if you go to the final slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we will send a link to the webinar recording within a week of today's webinar. The recording will be also posted to our CCAPS webinar archive, as well as our CCAPS YouTube page. And the University of Minnesota employees are now eligible to receive well-being points for listening to our webinars. Please view the link to the form on the second to last slide of our webinar. And our college contact information is also listed here. So I just want to thank you all again for joining us today. And Carolyn, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on this topic.
Oh, absolutely. It was a true pleasure. And I thank everyone for being interested in our topics. It was a pleasure. Thank you.